is to keep the focus on our mission, on the indispensable work each of you is doing every single day. And in my view, this is the best way to avoid dragging the Bureau deeper into the fray while reinforcing the values and principles that are so important in how we do our work. Now, it should go without saying, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyways. This is not easy for me. I love this place. I love our mission, and I love our people. But my focus is, and always has been, on us and on doing what's right for the FBI.
Christopher Wray also told his FBI audience, quote, "It was important to me that you all got to hear about my decision directly from me before it gets announced publicly." Director Wray praised the 38,000 people working at the FBI around the world and specified some of the horrors that FBI intelligence work has prevented. Quote, "Every day I've been in this role, my deep admiration and respect for all of you has grown more and more. I've seen up close the sacrifices you make each and every day to fulfill our mission and keep our fellow citizens safe. I've seen you turn in absolutely heroic acts of bravery over and over again to help people you've never met. And I've seen you show up for each other with compassion and support when your FBI family members need you most. And you've kept watch against the ever-present threat of terrorism, thwarting attacks on a busy pier in San Francisco, a crowded hospital outside Kansas City during COVID, a 4th of July parade in downtown Cleveland, to name just a few. And just 2 months ago, disrupting a mass casualty plot in Oklahoma City set for Election Day. Donald Trump's choice to lead the FBI wants to eliminate the intelligence division of the FBI that stopped every one of those terrorist plots.
The FBI's footprint has gotten so freaking big, and the biggest problem the FBI has come out of its intel shops. I'd break that component out of it. I'd shut down the FBI Hoover building on day one and reopening the next day as a museum of the deep state.
He, of course, won't dare say any of those words in his Senate confirmation hearing. But that was just months ago. For decades, law enforcement agencies around the world have looked to the FBI for guidance, assistance, and training. The FBI director said today, "It's all of us working together that have made the FBI the premier law enforcement and intelligence agency in the world. The people, our partners, are vying to send their officers and deputies to train with, the people businesses call when their networks have been compromised or their operations have been taken offline, the people the American people turn to when their child is in danger. The world is not going to turn to Kash Patel." Director Wray did not directly address the lies told about him and the FBI by Donald Trump, the man who appointed him, but he did say this, quote, "We're on the American people's side, the Constitution's side, and no matter what's happening out there, in here, we've got to stay committed to doing our work the right way every time with rigor and integrity. That means following the facts wherever they lead, no matter who likes it or doesn't, because there's always someone who doesn't like it. It means conducting investigations without fear or favor. And it means not pursuing investigations when the predication is not there. Now, let me be clear, we're accountable to the American people, and we welcome the tough questions, but in terms of how we do the work, we've got to maintain our independence and objectivity, staying above partisanship and politics."
Okay.
This is something
We
Kash Patel
just heard what he just said, right? We just heard what he just said.
could never.
You can take it for face value that they're, by and large, the majority of them are doing a great job. They're doing their jobs. They've prevented some things occurring that possibly could have killed a whole lot of people in the process with them doing their job. But at the same time, you got to look at the pressure cooker incident that happened during the marathon. in New York. You got to look at what kind of casualties that they raked up pertaining to the Mount Carmel, Waco, as well as the Oklahoma incident. You got to basically look at it through a wider lens of understanding that how come it was, I believe, I may be incorrect about this, I know it was from England. I think it was the Secret Service over there, or it may have been the FBI, I don't know which, that basically all of a sudden disclosed information about how that the Capitol building had been cased just a couple years before 9/11. They want to talk about how close-knit that they are, but I don't think they're no longer close-knit, because whenever you have law enforcement agencies that starts at the top that cannot even protect their people from a school shooting, or some idiot kicking out a damn window in Las Vegas and doing what he done, or some of these other crazy, horrifying events that we have seen on national TV again and again and again, regardless whether it was Obama's administration or the Bush's administration or the Clinton's administration or whoever's administration. We have seen these horror shows again and again and again. So whenever they talk about certain things that they have done, okay, let's go ahead and accept that. But let's also look at the things that they haven't done. Let's not be one-sided about it, Mr. Media Man. Because most of the time, whenever you talk about favoritism, it does come from the media. And it's really not about we the people anymore, but it's about the agency protecting itself. In a way, it really could care less about protecting the people, because it's got more commitment in protecting itself, even at the expense of covering up the truth with what did actually occur, not only with Mount Carmel and Waco and Oklahoma, but what happened on 9/11. We have had agencies now that has come out just recently, since Donald Trump stood on the golf course and said that the American people still has not got down to the bottom of 9/11. We have had agencies, various people, that have stuck their neck out without fear or favor, that has said there was a direct link coming from Saudi Arabia pertaining to 9/11, as well as myself, of the individuals that I met over here in Martin, Tennessee in 1988. So don't give us these half-truths. We don't want to hear only bits and pieces of what you want to tell us, Mr. Media MSNBC man. You know, I'm beginning to wonder if MSNBC hasn't basically lost their minds whenever it comes to being truthful to the American people. And I've heard them, get on there and just bash Donald Trump. And then as soon as the election was over with, they all whimpered down, stuck their tail between their legs, and goes running down there to Donald Trump asking for the king to pardon them. They're squirming. I used to like them. I really did. And in the morning times, a lot of that stuff that they was talking about really made a whole lot of sense. But here lately, they have been so on the left wing side that it ain't even funny, and not expressing all the facts rather than just part of them. And to me, if you're going to be a true investigator, a journalist investigator, you got to not be biased on either side towards going in and telling the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God. And regardless of how bad it's going to hurt one side or the other, regardless whether it's going to show remorse for one side or the other, you got to lay it out there the way that it is supposed to be laid out there. One of the worst jobs that I have witnessed on TV is aviation accidents. How them people can go in and take little bitty bits and pieces of debris of an airplane and put all that stuff together to be able to come up with a conclusion of what actually caused the death and injury of so many people. Those people has got a whole lot more nerves than what I've got whenever it comes to going and picking up fingers and arms and hands and arms and heads and half torsos of bodies and stuff like that. They've got a whole lot more zeal to them than what I got. It was bad enough for me just to look at some of the pictures that I was looking at pertaining to what happened in Waco as well as what happened in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. It's bad enough to hear the testimonies coming from the loved ones pertaining to how badly that they had been misled and how that the people didn't want to tell the whole truth. It's bad enough to understand and feel the pain and misery that come from such horrors like that, regardless whether it's a school shooting or whatever. It's a horrifying act, but for people to go in and pick up little bitty chunks of pieces and put an airplane back together again, I think there's one flight that they really have no earthly idea toward what happened because it basically went down into the ocean, and I don't even know that they've found the fuselage because of the area that it went down. I think it was about 4 miles deep, and it's really hard to go down into the ocean and pinpoint something. You would think, well, my God, it's a big old airplane, but yeah, you go down 3 or 4 miles and it's nothing but darkness down there, and it's like looking for a needle in a haystack. Kind of like that submarine where that rich guy and his boy died whenever the submarine basically imploded. It had some sort of a deal wrong with it. They got lucky by going down there and finding them pieces. They really did, with cameras. I mean, there's no doubt we got excellent equipment. We've got some of the best Naval Academy guys that knows what they're doing whenever it comes to stuff like that, kind of like Juso or Dr. Juso or whatever his name was. It always went down into the oceans and discovered different things. We got some excellent people, but I'm just saying, to go down that deep and to find something, you got to have a lot of luck as well as skill to be able to do it. You got to have a lot of luck and a lot of skill, because it's dangerous down there. It's dangerous, it's cold, it's dark. I'm just trying to make a point that to be a good journalist in general, you don't necessarily have to be an investigator or a detective, but just to be a good journalist, you need to listen to all the facts and present those facts to the American people. And that's not what I've been hearing here lately out of MSNBC. There must have been a reason why that the old boy ditched out and had to pay a $1 billion fine pertaining to what he had been involved in. And I forgot the guy's name. He was one of the original ones that founded that program. I think it was the same guy on MSNBC. I don't know. I may be wrong about that. May have been a major TV channel like ABC or CBS or whatever. But there must have been a reason why that he decided to ditch and bail and be out the $1 billion fine and go on about his life. Go on about his life. It's got to do with not telling the whole truth and being biased in various situations and in various dilemmas that happen with various politicians. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Kash Patel has promised to not stay above partisanship and politics. Christopher Wray closed his remarks to the FBI today this way. Remember that you chose and earned this job. You chose and earned the privilege of serving your country. The FBI needs you. The American people need you. So thank you for making that choice. Thank you for earning that privilege. Leading off our discussion tonight is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he chairs the Subcommittee on Federal Courts. He's also a member of the Senate Finance Committee and is the chair of the Senate Budget Committee. Begins his fourth term in the United States Senate next month. Senator Whitehouse, the contrast we see there between what Christopher Wray had to say and what Kash Patel had to say in that same collection of comments. Kash Patel is saying he wants to destroy the intelligence division of the FBI, the people who are preventing the next 9/11.
In fact,
No, what he wants to do is destroy those who are not doing their jobs and destroy those who are showing biased behavior. He's not wanting to destroy or dismantle the Bureau. He's just wanting to go in and pick out the bad ones and get them the you-know-what out of there, because they're the ones that has basically been working not above the board but below it. They're bogus. They're a bunch of liars, a bunch of crooks. They have done some very, very incredible, horrifying things pertaining to these people that Donald Trump wants to remove.
the intelligence division operation of the FBI was set up to remedy the problem of the firewall between the intelligence community and domestic law enforcement. And one of the signal
Set up by
achievements...
a Republican administration,
Yeah.
George W. Bush.
Yeah. And one of the signal achievements that has helped kept us safe has been to have that cooperation between the FBI and the domestic side and the intelligence community that is providing intel to the FBI and supporting it back and forth. So the idea that you would take down the domestic component of that makes no sense at all.
You're a former U.S. attorney, federal prosecutor, working with FBI
Yeah.
every day in everything you were doing as a U.S. attorney. From that perspective, talk about what someone like Kash Patel would mean in that job.
Well, what you would like to avoid is, for instance, an FBI director who would use his law enforcement powers to harass and punish members of your profession, members of the media,
Or sway.
for investigating, say, for instance, corruption in the Trump administration and exposing it. We don't have to think that that's a problem with Kash Patel. He has told us that that's a problem, that he will, in fact, use the powers of the FBI to punish members of the media. You would like to avoid an FBI director who comes in with a prefabricated list of people he wants to get for reasons of vengeance. And we don't have to have that worry about Kash Patel because we know he intends to do that. He has said so. He has an enemies list that he has published of people who he'd like to go after.
Includes names like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and some very minor people who are perfectly nice and normal folks who really don't need that kind of, Hillary Clinton can stand up on her own 2 feet. She's a serious figure. Some of the lesser known people are the ones who are even more vulnerable to that kind of fear. So Ray used an important word in there. He said,
I'm gonna weigh in on what you're talking about here, just a little bit on a situation that I had to embark upon to. This was in 2009 after a major ice storm had hit up here in Kentucky that shut down about 70 different counties. The governor had to put out a state of emergency. And I went up there to help and basically got run plumb out of a town and got plumb run out of Livingston County, which is an illegal act in and of itself. I finally landed in Mayfield, Kentucky, working with a crisis center out of Atlanta, basically feeding about 5,000 in the morning, 5,000 at noon, and then 5,000 in the evening. Stayed down there with this crisis center, give or take, for about 4 to 6 weeks. Gave it enough time for it to warm up, for all the ice, the 3 inches of ice that they got, to get off the lines, and for the electric people to start putting up electricity again so people could have a normal life. In the meantime, after things settled down a little bit, while I was up in Mayfield, Kentucky, I didn't know for sure what I wanted to do. It was still cold. It was still cold. But I went down to Land Between the Lakes on the Tennessee side, over by area, I think it's called Joanne or something like that. It's just a name of a little bay. And I stayed there for 2 more weeks until I prayed about it and figured out where God was leading me. And basically I left from there and went directly past Kentucky and went on up into Indiana and went on up into northern Indiana, and then come back down through Dayton, Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio, went over the Ohio Bridge, went over the Ohio River, went through Florence, and went to an area called Big Bone, Kentucky. And I've mentioned this before on some of my other work. And I wound up, some people that had come in contact with me in Florence put me in a hotel for about 2 days, paid for the hotel because they realized that I was in bad shape, because I was basically sleeping outside in the middle of snow and ice. And of course I had good clothing and good sleeping bags and stuff like that, but still, I mean, you're still having to endure stuff that your body ordinarily don't have to endure living like that. I couldn't tell you how many times that I've eaten out of my vehicles. I couldn't tell you how many times that I've had to sleep either in my truck or in my trailer. I mean, one time I left Phoenix, Arizona whenever it was about 80 degrees. This was like in January. And drove all the way to Durango, Colorado. Went to bed in my camper. I mean, not my camper, but my utility trailer, and woke up with about 8 inches of snow on the ground. And then had to drive down the million dollar highway doing about 10 mile an hour 4-wheel drive, which was a very, very scary scenario at times. If you've ever driven down the $1 million highway, it is beautiful in the summertime, but man, it is treacherous whenever there's a foot of snow on the ground. And I was pulling a trailer with a load on it, etc. So I've been through some extreme weather patterns, me out there on the road doing what I have done. So I wound up staying at a church called something Big Bone. I don't forgot the name of it now. And a couple of the guys was curious about what I was doing, how come I was up that way, and etc. And I explained my story to them briefly. Didn't think nothing about it, because I mean, they trusted me enough to keep me in the basement of the church for about 3 nights because it was cold. And whenever I left from there, I had to go back into Florence, determining on which way that I wanted to go. And the next thing you know, I get pulled over by about 10 or 12 cops. The FBI sting. They take me to Florence, Kentucky, book me, fingerprint me. I'm waiting to be figured out towards where they're going to put me and what they're going to do with me. And all of a sudden this jerk comes up there and asks me to take off my shoes and then take off my socks. And then whenever he gets my socks off, he pretends like he looks at my feet, and then he hollers up at the captain and says, "Oh, this must be the wrong guy. He's got all his toes." Like that. Well, that was being handled by the FBI. And then whenever I left from there and went back into Oklahoma to finish out what I needed to do in Oklahoma, that's whenever I went to 2 churches up in Edmond, Oklahoma, And before I got in the door good, I was already asked to leave the parking lot. That's how close of connections that they got, either through the Bureau or Homeland Security, Secret Service. Then I went to another church right there in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and basically got asked to leave out of that church too as well. So there was 3 major churches, and this occurred before I ever got my job working for auto builders, or not auto builders, but Body Works down in Norman, Oklahoma. Because the guy that I went to work for, he had 3 body shops, one in downtown Oklahoma, one in Norman, and one in Edmond. Well, I went to work in the one south in Norman. And I'm just telling you that I was harassed not only in Florence, Kentucky, I was harassed not only by certain Land Between the Lakes officials pertaining to being a federal park, but I was harassed once I got down to Oklahoma before I even got my job, not knowing if I was going to get a job, of basically being banned out of 2 or 3 different churches. So whenever it comes to them being able to destroy an individual's life towards basically being on a witch hunt, just like the federal judge told me up in Paducah, Kentucky, Mr. Jackson, we can distribute a whole lot more aggravation into your life than what you've ever thought about distributing into ours. And man, did he ever know what he was talking about whenever he said that. And this could very well be the reason why Donald Trump wants to go in, and I'm not going to say dismantle, but basically prune the bad fruit out of the Bureau so that the good fruit can be more effective. That's what I'm thinking. Because I went round and round and round just with Homeland Security, either in Memphis, Tennessee, or in Nashville, Tennessee, towards them directly trying to destroy my life. Knowing that I was not a harm to George Walker Bush's life, but they still pursued it as I was. And basically costed me another 6 months out of my life. That I can prove. I'm not just whistling Dixie. I can prove this stuff. And I'm pretty sure there has to be some sort of a record in Florence, Kentucky, about maybe an hour from Big Bone, Kentucky. There has to be some sort of a record towards a shakedown that occurred to me, unless they expunged the records like Damian Cross did over here in Kenton, Tennessee, whenever he ripped a page out of the Minuteman book that basically had a file in there of what went on in my life in 1983 after I went to Kenton, Tennessee for help. And the type of help that I got was go to Bolivar, while they basically patted my dad on the back and told him what kind of good job that he'd done. Even though he attacked me the night before with 64 staples up and down my belly. I'm not exaggerating about these things. There's been witnesses. There's still live witnesses regarding that incident alone, and that was in 1983. As far as I know, Don Curry's still living. Him and his wife. As far as I know, there are certain people in Kenton, Tennessee that is very aware of what went on in my life 40 years ago. That basically started this snowball towards it starting a little, getting bigger, getting bigger, and then it turned into a great big snowball. By the time they got through with me over here in Martin, Tennessee, because that's exactly what they was doing, somebody had caught whiff of various things that had went on in my life, and now they was trying to make me out to be a homegrown terrorist in Martin, Tennessee, pertaining to falsifying files, even though I was passing out Bible literature to an individual at the time working for Pickles. I don't even know that Pickles is even there anymore. There's some sort of a fast food or a convenience store place there. I don't even know that it's still got the same name or not. They went in and reworked the whole store. I think they built a whole building right there. But it's just a bunch of bogus stuff with a bunch of bogus people that can basically ruin an individual's life. And I think I can pretty well speak truthful of that, especially once I wound up being apprehended and they made up false lies about me towards me going to Washington, D.C., which I was going to Washington, D.C., but they said that I was going to Washington, D.C. to be an assassin to take out George Walter H. Bush's life, which was nothing more than a lie, and that lie had come from upper levels of the Bureau. Or it actually come from the president himself, or the vice president. Because if a president does have a threat against his life, by law, the officials has to let them know that. They got to give them a sheet and say, here's a sheet right here. You may want to try to dodge around these people, because they've already done said that if they get hold of you, they're going to work you over. I think by law, they have to give the president a sheet in whoever makes a threat, a vital threat to that president. So I know that those orders pertaining to Wheeling, West Virginia was coming out of either the Bureau or coming directly out of Homeland Security, out of Washington, D.C., from the president's office. That's how badly that they wanted me to stop. That's how badly that they didn't want biblical Bible prophecy to be fulfilled. That's how badly that they turned to the left versus the right, and that's the reason why we're in the shape that we're in. And I hope to God that Donald J. Trump can understand that and realize that, and I think that he can, because there was a reason why that he kicked off his last presidential election in Waco, Texas. There's got to be a reason why that Donald J. Trump said what he said in a golf tournament pretty close to New York, that the American people still hadn't gotten down to 9/11 yet. Now, I may not be the sharpest knife in the drawer pertaining to having a big PhD and all this other schooling stuff that they claim what makes you smart, but I am smart enough to put 2 plus 2 together equals 4. 4 plus 4 equals 8. I am smart enough to put the dots together to realize there must be something going on, especially now since Donald Trump is coming back into power, and now there is a big ruckus already going on before he ever gets up there. Somebody smells something in the wood pile that don't smell right. Look at how crafty that his eyes is. That guy right there, ain't no telling how much freaking garbage that he knows about, that his commanding officers have been involved in, or they've just turned their heads and allowed for it to happen. That's just like all these illegal immigrants. There is no way that these agencies could not have known, the Bureau and all these other agencies could not have known about the dangers that they was putting the American people in. And they want to get on national TV and tell us how that they done this and done that and done this. They may have, and I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they stopped whatever that was being mustered up. I'm glad that they saved lives. But there's so many other areas that they have failed the American people in, and they don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about their side. Well, go ahead and talk. We'll listen.
The word predication. He used that on purpose. Predication, as you know, is what prevents the FBI from going out and investigating somebody willy-nilly just because somebody doesn't like them. You can't open an FBI investigation unless there is predication that a crime has been committed and that there's reason to consider this person as a legitimate suspect. So when he uses the word predication in that statement, he is making a point, and it's a point that I don't think Kash Patel understands.
His confirmation is by no means certain at this point.
By no means
there
certain.
have not been 51 Republicans step forward and say, we 51 are voting for his confirmation. But if...
My mind just went back to it wasn't The Gauntlet. It was another movie with a bunch of motorcycles in it. Then again, it may have been The Gauntlet, where the actor was busting a bunch of these motorcycle guys because they needed a motorcycle. And basically, he used the reasoning in behind him doing what he was doing of reasonable suspicion. That's what they're talking about right here. Back it up. Let's listen to it again.
If he gets
Back it up. Clint Eastwood used the memento
Kind of.
that all it takes for a police officer to pull you over and start asking questions is reasonable suspicion. Now listen to his wording that he uses.
So, Ray used an important word in there. He used the word predication. He used that on purpose. Ray used an important word in there. He used the word predication. He used that on purpose. Predication, as you know, is what prevents the FBI from going out and investigating somebody willy-nilly just because somebody doesn't like them. You can't open an FBI investigation unless there is predication that a crime has been committed and that there's reason to consider this person as a legitimate suspect. So when
Reasonable suspicion is all it takes. And I have been harassed probably over a dozen times by police officers, either in one state or the other, either on a local level or a federal level, by throwing that up to me and saying, well, this is the reason why that we're down here, is we suspected this or that or that or this. Yeah. So that word is so loosely thrown out there, you can basically maneuver it around any way you want towards reasonable suspicion. Defy reasonable. You know, one man's junk is another man's treasure. Please explain to me what reasonable is.
the word predication in that statement, he is making a point, and it's a point that I don't think Kash Patel understands.
His confirmation is by no means certain at this point.
By no means
There
certain.
have not been 51 Republicans step forward and say, we 51 are voting for his confirmation. But if he gets there, let's talk about what we might discover that we thought were solid walls that turn out to be just traditions or niceties.
Yeah.
Let's talk about predication, for example. I mean, I've been telling people they can't just investigate anyone. They're not allowed to do that. What if the FBI director
But they do.
orders an investigation without any predication whatsoever, just a name? Here, go investigate that person. He's asked, what's the predication? Just go investigate that person. Who gets in trouble for what, if anything, in this new Trump version of the FBI?
It's hard to know because the FBI has never been, at least not in recent years, put through that stress test before. When the last really bad...
And that's more the reason why that somebody should govern these bureaus. They've been basically having an open check. They can do whatever they want to do to whoever they want to do it to a certain limit. Now they'll tell you, oh no, none of that goes on. But you know, somebody's cousin, somebody's nephew, somebody makes a telephone call that's kin to somebody in some of these channels that got roughed up real bad. Next thing you know, the FBI gets involved towards snooping around, finding out what it was. And they really don't even know if the information that was given to that person was credible or not, but they still go ahead and pursue it. It happens all the time. Happens all the time.
that I can think of out of the FBI was Director Comey breaking the rules of the Department of Justice and the FBI to make himself look grand and independent and morally superior by pledging to pursue Hillary Clinton.
But his breaking of precedent was simply the public comment.
And if you don't believe me, you can look up Ted Gunderson, that was working for the Bureau in Memphis, Tennessee, and listen to some of his testimony pertaining to the dirt that he brought up on various people in the Bureau. And I'm sure there's probably other people out there that has come forth with information that has stained the department.
Public comment.
Exactly.
Not the actual conduct of the investigation.
Precisely.
Just the public comment.
It was cabined to his own actions. It's a different
Yes,
thing when you
yes,
start
yes.
directing your
Right.
improper
He didn't tell anyone
purposes.
to make that comment.
He made it.
He did it. Yeah.
It's a different thing when you're trying to get agents to do that. And I think the other thing that you saw,
And also look at how many illegitimate investigations was held on Donald Trump himself. I mean, they hounded that poor man to death. And there wasn't no way that he should have been obligated to a court up there in New York over a charge that happened umpteen years ago that statute of limitations done already run out on. Do you realize how chaotic it would be if people was to be bringing up stuff and going in front of a judge 20, 25, 30 years ago pertaining to a charge? He said, she said. You realize how chaotic it would be as far as the backlog?
you saw Chris Wray saying towards the end in that statement was he's trying to revive and empower the esprit de corps of the FBI agents to build resistance from the internal operating FBI staff against the abuse of the institution to which they have dedicated their lives.
You know, I saw that word predication and I noted it, but I didn't triple underline it the way you have. It's so important for us that you do that. And certainly all 38,000 people who heard that word in that sentence heard it the way you heard it as someone who has worked in FBI investigations.
Yeah. The sad part about this is that what Director Wray has done is to set a precedent that upon a new president coming in, the FBI director departs. And that breaks an institutional tradition of these 10-year terms that wasn't just convenience. It wasn't just so you know you've got a 10-year job. It was to disconnect the role of the FBI director from politics and from the sequence of political elections. It had that specific purpose. And for Wray to simply step back and let that go, I think is a important damage to an important principle.
Let me take a guess at what he would say in response to that. It's not gone as long as the next president doesn't threaten an FBI director.
Yes, but is this going to be the last president who can make threats to an FBI director and clear the decks?
Right.
Perhaps, Trump's kind of an anomaly in a lot of different ways, particularly morally. But the point of principles is that they're there to protect the public. And in this case, I think Wray let us down by stepping away and moving this time frame into the sequence of presidential elections.
You believe he should have waited to be fired?
I think you should have made him make that choice, make him own it.
Put it in writing.
And put it in writing.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you so much for starting off our discussion today.
Good to be with you.
And coming up, our next guest has led Senate oversight investigations at the federal.
But then again, you got to look at it from another perspective. Maybe he knew that if he dared them, that they may have had a flood of information that could have buried that freaking guy. And rather than take that chance on being scolded publicly in front of the public pertaining to the trash that he had on him, he decided to go ahead and bow out elegantly, kind of like President Nixon. Once he was confronted with all the evidence, it's like if you got two different ways that you can get out of this. You can either walk out elegantly, or we can smear your name all over the general public. And what did Mr. Nixon do? He walked out elegantly. And it sounds to me like that's what that director done. he walked out elegantly because he knew something that they knew that was really going to be that much more disturbing in the eyes of the public if it all come out. That's my guess, that it's a possibility that could have been the reason why that he went ahead and didn't give up no fight. See, there's always two sides to the story. There's always two sides to the coin, as my grandpa used to always say. And these commentators working for these newscasters, they don't really get into the questionnaire like they should. There's only 2 or 3 interviewers. 60 Minutes, I think 60 Minutes is one of them, and as the nation's something addressing the nations comes on Sunday morning, she's good about cornering these people up and really getting to the nitty gritty about getting an answer. We want an answer. Thanks for listening. Shalom.